In May 1945, the Army shipped me from the replacement depot in Worms to the 3rd IDA in Salzburg. Through demolished Nuremberg, down the empty freeways with the abandoned jet fighters parked where they were abandoned when Germany surrendered, past the destruction of war everywhere, the chaos of liberated peoples with no organization to feed or house them, left on their own until the U.S. Army could organize some means of support. The Germans were on their own, no help for them. Starvation was too good for them. The first job of the Army was to collect the freed German soldiers, put them in prison camps to be denazified. This was mainly accomplished a couple of weeks after the war. Then the Army was getting us replacements in so the old-timers could go home. The collecting would take a couple of weeks or so. The denazification would take a year or two. The 3rd was slated for occupation duties, but other divisions were getting ready to ship to Japan for the war in the Pacific. The Army decreed that it was a court-martial offense to fraternize with the German women. That lasted a little while, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. The women were hungry and wanted cigarettes, or soap, or food. Everything was in short supply and desperately needed, and the soldiers wanted sex. After the war, the French women who fraternized with the German occupiers paid dearly from the anti-Nazi French, mainly partisans. They were beaten, had their heads shaved, paraded through town, and other indignities. German women were spared these punishments, as they did it because they were hungry. Morgenthau was getting his revenge. When I got to headquarters, there was no radio operator assignments open, so most of the time until we moved to Darmstadt, I did various driving jobs. The division put on a musical program performed by Austrians at the Mozart Center. I helped put it on by various odd jobs. It was not much, or I would remember what it was. I still don't have a radio operator's job. I did go to the symphony, and I wrote a letter to Kay on my helmet liner while waiting for it to begin. That's hard to do, of course, as it is a dome surface and not amenable to writing. She had all these letters until recently when we sold out and moved down here to Covington. I took pictures of the Mozart Center. Some I have lost and some I still should have. My buddy was a guy named Bill Blake, which was not his real name, I found. He claimed he had deserted from the Navy in San Francisco and then joined the Army. We were both radio operators. In Salzburg, we were helping put on the musical program. One time we had parked the Jeep in the square outside the auditorium, and someone stole a can of sea rations from where the glove compartment would have been in a civilian car. Someone told him the person that did it lived in one of the apartments nearby, so I tagged along as he went to try to get it back. All the time I wondered what this was all about. It's just a can of sea rations, the last thing you would want to eat. We knocked on the door and it was opened by a woman. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at her and demanded she give him the can of rations or he would shoot her. This made me extremely nervous as the war was over and they shot murderers. Eventually, he gave up threatening the woman and we left without getting the can of sea rations. Later he told me his name was Beaupre. He became a dentist after the war and made a short visit to Kay and me at Lake Forest Park many years after the war. We were together until I shipped out to go home. When the war ended, the Army put the various 3rd Division battalions to occupying the small towns around Salzburg, while collecting various German Army units and getting them into prison camps. The headquarters battery I was in had the job, of course, of overseeing the activities of the subordinate units. Even though I was in headquarters, I never did see the general. Even later, when we were in Melsungen or Darmstadt, did I ever see the general. I drove his car and was with his gopher, the executive officer, Colonel Coyne. I never saw the general. The general's car was the Mercedes